Hey there, emerging expat! You're tuned in to Let's Move to Portugal. I'm Victoria from Expats Everywhere's podcast, and I have the distinct honor of bringing you, YouTube travelers, and our resident of Portugal experts, Expats Everywhere's Josh and Kalie. Each week they'll inspire, they'll educate, and they'll accompany you on your journey to Portuguese residency. This week on Let's Move to Portugal, join Josh and Daniel as they explore the nuances of living between Los Angeles and Porto, sharing insights on house sitting, the real estate market in Porto, and the cost of living differences between the two cities.
What's up, expats and travelers alike? Welcome back to Expats Everywhere presents Let's Move to Portugal podcast. Kalie, how you doing?
Oh, I'm tired. We just got off the ship after a 16-day cruise across the transatlantic, and then we were in Italy, traveled to a new place. So just tired, but all in all good. How are you doing?
Tired as well. Just to let you, listener, know, if you're also a viewer and watching this on the YouTube channel for the podcast, we are filming using our computers. That's why it's in 720 instead of nice 1080.
Well, we do the computer at home, but
yeah,
it's
but
better quality. We're in a hotel room. It's nighttime now. By the time we've gotten to shoot this, so it's a little dark. But you know what? We're doing this. We're doing this for you, listener, and we just appreciate you tuning in every week to hear these weekly welcomes. If you are new here and you don't know much about this podcast, we start out with an intro from our producer, Victoria, and then we move into the weekly welcome, where we catch you up to speed on what's happening in the world of expats everywhere. Then we slide into usually an interview, and this week we're talking with a semi-expat named Daniel. This is an interesting one.
It is, and I think it's something that a lot of people want to do. But before we get to that, let's just chat a little bit about kind of what's happening in this past week, really. We dropped a video on the main YouTube channel on Expats Everywhere where it was a bit niche. It's about cryptocurrency, and we know that not everyone is into crypto. There is a decent audience out there that's into crypto, but we know that it's not most of you. But we felt like it was an important topic to get out there. We were really thankful for Fresh to prepare that and allow us to film with them. And I think we have another idea that one of you all gave us where we're going to speak specifically with them about retiree income and making a video to figure out how retiree income works. And it's difficult to say, like, this is exactly what you're going to pay in taxes because everyone's tax situation is different. Everyone's income levels are different. But I think that doing another video with them will be able to give us clarity on that topic in terms of like what people can expect.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe some examples could help as well. But if we don't go that route, then just, a little clarity on what we be paying taxes on and what are the percentages really look like in this progressive scale that's always talked about and everything. So.
Yeah. And that just kind of triggered my thought real quick. If you have something specific that you want asked, because we've not filmed that piece yet, if you have something specific you want asked or something that you want to know about related to retiree or passive income tax, let us know.
Yeah, you can email either me at info@expatseverywhere.com or podcast@expatseverywhere.com,
or leave it as a comment in the comment section.
Yeah. Oh, you got lots of options here. Yeah, lots of options, and we'll try to get to that. So that's
good. If you're listening to this just on a podcast player, don't put it in that podcast player because we're really bad at checking that. We'd love to see your comments on Spotify. However, it takes us a month to get around to them.
Yeah.
So if you're just listening to this, then email us. But if you are watching this on YouTube, then drop a comment. We'll figure out how to get that answered in the video we do with Fresh.
Oops. And I just hit the
You just did the thing that you told me not to do.
Right before I was like, okay, let's not hit the table because we have this shared mic and our other setup is a lot different.
Yeah.
And I was about to say this will be the last time that it'll be like this because I feel like I have to be like hunched over a little bit in here to make sure I'm loud enough. But so this will be the last time because we will be back to Porto this coming weekend. So that'd be nice.
Yeah. And if you don't know what Kalie's talking about, we have been traveling for the past almost 5 weeks. And it's coming to an end, thankfully.
Yeah.
We just got off a 15-night cruise, transatlantic cruise. There were, I think we counted 11 sea days.
It was a lot of fun. They're a lot
Great
of fun.
fun.
If you haven't done it.
Didn't get much work done, which brings me to the next thing. I apologize to all of you that we did not get our annual cost of living video out to you in time before the trip yet.
It's already filmed.
Well, it's filmed but not edited.
Yeah.
I was supposed to edit it during this trip. Just found that really challenging. I found it like challenging to sit down and slog out through an edit.
That always happens though. I feel like we go, like we always travel around Christmas time, and it's normally a couple weeks, and we say, okay, we'll do this and this and this while we're on that trip, and it just never gets done. No. It's just really hard to do that.
Yeah.
But that will be coming to you very soon because we've already logged everything. So we have the tally for this year's 2025 cost of living that we've done. You gave a face. So that'll be out soon. But before that, we have an interview with Eric. And his is an interesting story as well because he moved to Portugal and then is now back in the States, had to move back. And he talks about that. But that'll be on the main channel.
Yes.
Let's talk about what's going on this one, though, with Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel. So my meeting with Daniel, my introduction to Daniel, I guess, was a very interesting one because he had bumped into Kalie on the street. And then I was going into Kiwa Cafe to meet someone else, and Daniel was in there. And Daniel had struck up a conversation with them before I had arrived. And he's like, hey, I've met your wife before. So I found him to be a really fascinating guy. I ended up pulling up a table with 4 other people. There were 4 people total.
Like a whole table or a chair?
Well, a chair. I pulled up a chair at a table. I didn't pull up a table.
Well,
I didn't turn the tables over. So I sat down and found Daniel to be super interesting. And I thought, Kalie, I forgot to get the guy's message, like email or what do you call it? WhatsApp. How can I get in touch with this guy? And she was like, oh, I think he's emailed before. So,
well, he had emailed before, and then after that meeting, he emailed again. So I was like, oh, he just emailed. So,
that I forgot. But no, we were able to catch up on some things that piqued my interest in the conversation I had with him live. And then we were able to really dig into it here in this episode. So we kind of go through a vast array of things from, he talks about how he has his wife is Japanese and he likes to find other Japanese speakers, and there's a Japanese speaking community that exists in Porto. So he's been able to dig into that. He's a guy that, like, I think, I don't want to say many, but like quite a few of our listeners wants to at least start out by splitting time between Portugal and the US. For whatever reasons. Everyone has different reasons for needing to do that. But he talks about how he's able to make it work and what the cost differences are like between the two.
Yeah, that's big.
And how they're able to and how they're able to financially like have 2 houses because they bought a house.
Well, that's actually when I ran into him, he was walking with a realtor looking to buy. So then I was surprised to find out that he had, like, I knew he was buying, but I hadn't realized that he wasn't full-time here.
Yeah.
So it is something that we've heard of others doing. So it was nice to get someone on the podcast to discuss, like, why are you doing that? You know, the reasons behind it, like you said, and how that actually works. How do you make that work? And are you happy with it? And if not, like, why not, right? Like, what could make it better?
Yeah, we've spoken to several couples now or several people now about, you know, either splitting time or purchasing a property before they move to Portugal, which I find to be a fascinating thing. I get it, but I also get why other people don't get it. You know what I mean? Why other people are like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just rent for the first year or 2? Like, how do you know exactly what neighborhood you want to live in? But I understand the argument made by those that want to go ahead and buy and get locked into a price and be invested in the place that they want to move.
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating conversation that Daniel and I had, and
well, let's get to it then.
I hope that you all enjoy it.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, but before we do that, let's talk about this week's sponsor, Green Ocean Global Advisors.
Yes, we always recommend, no matter where you are in the moving process, to get your finances in order. So that's in your home country and then the country that you're moving to.
And speaking about homes, what if you sell your house before leaving or do it after? What are the capital gains implications like? Well, a financial advisor will be able to walk you through this type of thing.
And what about distributions? Maybe you have a 401k or a pension and you need to figure out how much you should be drawing from for the lifestyle that you're going to have.
Now, you can use this link in the description section below to talk to John from Green Ocean Global Advisors to see if he's a fit for you. You'll have a free 15-minute consultation just for being an Expats Everywhere listener, so you can use that To get your free 15 minutes, click the link in the description section below. Now, on to the show. Hey, Daniel, so glad to have you here. I did not expect our second conversation to be in the form of a podcast, because the first time we met, we were sitting down with a mutual friend at Kiwa Cafe, and we struck up this conversation, and it was fascinating to know you knew a bit about me, but it was even greater to learn more about you. And I look forward to having the audience learn more about you today as well. Where can we find you today? You're not here in Portugal.
No, I'm in Van Nuys, which is part of Los Angeles.
Okay. And so what has you there, but then a few weeks ago you were here?
Right. Well, I'm at a place in my life where I'm basically living in both places. I'm living in LA and living in Porto. If it were up to me entirely, I'd be 100% in Porto. But my wife has many things in LA that tie her to it. So we're doing a balancing act right now. My definite goal is to completely move to Porto as soon as possible. But it's a little bit of a negotiation, a balancing act.
So what exactly has you between the two? Is it work or is it family?
Well, we're both retired, so it's not work. I do have my nuclear family isn't here anymore, but I do have cousins and things like that. But more than that, my wife, who's also retired, just although she's not native to here, she's Japanese, and she came to the States when she was in her 30s. She was a professor at Occidental College, a private college in LA, for more than 30 years. And she has a very tight network there, which, among other things, that's what ties us to here. Also, we've been in this house a very long time and have been working on it for all these years. So it's actually extremely comfortable for us. And there's this beautiful garden, which you can't see right outside my window here, which is my pride and joy. We do have now quite a nice apartment in Porto, but it doesn't have a garden at all.
No garden, not yet, right? Okay,
right.
So let's talk about how you kind of split time in both places. What does that look like?
Well, it is a bit of a challenge because we have dogs, and so far have not brought the dogs to Portugal. So when we come here, the biggest challenge is just finding somebody to stay in the house and take care of the dogs. We've actually been using a service that you may be familiar with called Trusted House Sitters. We're just about to do our fourth sit with them, or host our fourth sit with them. And I have to say, it's gone quite well. It's gone quite well. It's been very useful for us.
Awesome. I'm actually curious to ask you about that. They're not a sponsor, although I wish they would be a sponsor of the podcast. That'd be amazing, because I do see that they're actually growing kind of in not just popularity, but just like brand recognition. You have YouTube ads that they're now placing, and I just see them more, right? So how did you find Trusted House Sitters, and are you also a trusted house sitter where you can go and travel and stay in different places?
I see. I found them a few years ago, probably on an internet ad, in fact, I would imagine. Okay. And the thing came up a few times, and it's a bit of a strange concept, just because you're trusting, your whole life to people you don't know at all. But there are certain safeguards in place, and there are certain things you have to learn. The one thing that I have learned is it's super important to make your expectations very, very clear from the beginning about everything. There's a bit of a learning curve to being a good host. And I think we're little by little taking it on. We have not taken the other role of being guests as well. Certainly you can do that. It's a separate membership on the site, so you pay a little more for that. But other than that, it's easy as pie, and I would do it, but there hasn't been really the need for it.
Okay. Would you say that Trusted House Sitters is like Airbnb with pets?
No. I would liken it more to a dating service, in fact. They make introductions, and the great thing is that no money changes hands either way. You give your sitters a place to stay for whatever period of time, and they take care of your house and your pets, and it all works very well. But Trusted House Sitters basically is all about putting you together and making it pretty smooth. You put up a listing and they feed you 5 applicants at a time, and you accept them or decline them. And then if you don't find somebody you like, they send you more. But in fact, the quality of the applicants has been quite high. We've been quite happy with the people that have responded to our ads. And 2 out of the 3 times it was a home run. One time there were a few issues, but that's why I say you learn and you make your expectations more clear, and it gets better, I think.
Okay, nice. All right, well, so moving on from that, this has given you the ability to spend longer amounts of time in one place or another. And I mean, in this place in particular is Porto. So how long are you able to stay? Like, do you stay your whole 90 days? Because you don't yet have a visa.
As close as I can. As close as I can. No, I have not gone through the residence process for Portugal, and so I'm just going in on my passport and the Schengen visa and the Schengen non-visa, and it's worked fine so far. It means a lot of flying around, and on top of all this, my wife's mother is quite elderly. She's 95, and she lives by herself in Japan, by herself in a house, and so Motoko goes there 3 times a year, and so we're just traveling all the time. We have a lot of plane flights,
racking up miles.
Yeah, but it works. It works. It's hard for us to be away from the dogs. We love the place that we have in Porto. It's beautiful, but it's a little smaller than this place, and it doesn't have all the comforts of home. So it's a trade-off. If the day ever comes when I can sell this house, then I'll buy something like it, in Porto. But I'm not sure if circumstances are going to allow me to sell this house or not.
Okay. Well, I wanted to come on to the house because this was something that we spoke about when we were at the cafe together. You seem to have a pretty good handle on real estate here in Portugal, using different resources, both people, talking to people, and then also your own knowledge. So let's talk a bit about the buying process. First, what made you want to buy in Porto, considering you don't have a plan to live here full term?
Well, in fact, I do have that plan, so it was anticipating that plan.
Anticipating that, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it'll take a while. When I went to Porto for the first time, it's probably 3 years ago now, a little more than 3 years ago, I just immediately knew this is my place. I grew up in Los Angeles. I spent my whole life trying to get out of it. Never really, there's lots of people that like Los Angeles, and God bless them, but I just don't happen to, and I never have. It's just not, I like cities, but this is not the kind of city I like. And so as I was approaching my retirement, I was, looking all over the States. I thought maybe San Francisco, maybe Oregon. I have a lot of requirements. One of them is that I'm not that good with humidity. And so, U.S. East Coast cities were kind of off the table for me just because of the humidity. Humidity is one place where we take a little bit of a hit in Porto because it is, as you well know, a little bit humid in the summertime, especially compared to LA, but not like Tokyo and not like New York.
So what were some of the things about Porto that drew you there? I mean, we know that the humidity aside, you don't like that, but what are things that appeal to you?
Almost everything. The apartment that we have there now is smack dab in the center of the city. It's like as central as you can get by Boyal Market. And this is just my off-the-cuff estimate, but I honestly think there are probably 300 restaurants within a 10-minute walk of my house, of my apartment, in Porto. So I love that. And restaurants have gotten so extremely expensive here now that I don't feel I can really go very often, but in Portugal, they're still, for our circumstances, they're still quite affordable. And so, I really enjoy the cafes, the restaurants. Porto is a beautiful city. I love the, for lack of a better expression, the old world charm. I have become a member of a sailing club in Porto, and I can walk to the marina in Freishu. They also sail out of Leixões on the ocean. I love, for example, they're just places that just fill my heart there. For example, if there's an art center near the Parque de Virtudes called, I believe the art center is called Arvore, and they have a cafe behind it called Bosco. And do you know Portugal by any chance? Have you been there?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just love that place. I think that, when I sit there and drinking a coffee, looking out over the river, I just think this is living, Yeah. And I walk a lot for exercise. And so, Porto is a wonderful place to walk if you can deal with the hills a little bit. Always someplace new. I love the fact that, other parts of Europe are so accessible, from Porto or anywhere in Portugal, really. I've had nothing but positive experiences with the Portuguese people that I've met. They've been, people are people. So some people are super friendly and super helpful, and some people are a little less so. But overall, I've just been really knocked over, really, I have to say, by just how lovely the Portuguese people that I've encountered have been. Also, the expat community in Porto, I have found to be just a real revelation. People are so nice and so friendly, and all with this love of Porto and Portugal. And, there's so many events and so many things to do. And I've just found it, even though I've only spent an aggregate of less than a year there, I've just found it quite easy to make good friends and to find people to do stuff with. And I had a visitor a little while ago when I was there who is a huge tango enthusiast. And so she opened me up to this is something I'd always kind of been interested in, doing a little bit of tango, but I had heard that it was a very difficult dance, whatever. But she kind of made me go to a milonga and a class. It turns out there's a huge tango scene in Porto. You'd have no idea. Huh. There's a festival coming up in the summertime, in fact. Yeah. But so if this is something, for anybody who's interested in that, just Google it. And there are many classrooms, and they're not expensive. And again, the lessons were primarily in Portuguese. And although my Portuguese is improving, it's still quite limited. And they were, quite helpful giving me instruction in English. And what else? What's not to like? As a place to live, I find it quite ideal.
Yeah, you brought up a few special interest things, and I want to come back to those. But at the very beginning, you talked about how there were so many restaurants around you, and you were finding that in Los Angeles, you're kind of being priced out of going more frequently. And I'm curious to know, and we can give the audience an indication of what you're talking about here in Porto. What do you pay for a meal for two people in Los Angeles, and what are you paying when you're in Porto?
Yeah, we are not people that over order at all. If we go out to eat, we'll each get an entree, share an appetizer or salad, maybe have a glass of wine, but more typically just drink tap water. But even so, as we know, in the States, when you order off the menu, you don't pay the menu prices. There's, sales tax added to that, and then tip on top of that. And there's been amazing tip inflation now here. Whereas, for most of my life, 15% was considered normal. And even at the fast food restaurants, they hand you your credit card thing, and it gives you the opportunity to put a tip. And the choices are 18, 20, and 25%. At a fast food restaurant, practically anywhere you go. So to answer your question, just at a normal restaurant, a proper sit-down restaurant, but nothing, over the top fancy or anything, it's going to cost, oh my Lord, typically $60 per person. So for the two of us, maybe $120 just to go out to dinner. Yeah.
Wow.
The entrees, typically, the numbers all start with 3, meaning $30, $38, which is very, very different than the way it was here 10 or 20 years ago. And so it feels like too much to spend for a meal, especially just a weekly go out to dinner type of meal, not celebrating anything. Whereas in Portugal, similarly, I don't know, maybe we spend 45 euros, probably less typically, it's not free. And, we're fortunate that we can afford that a couple times a week, but it's just an enormous difference. It's just an enormous difference.
And do you find yourself being able to have that glass of wine or even order a bottle instead of just getting water?
Yeah. As you well know, the prices of wine in Portugal are, from the consumer's point of view, are just unbelievable. Whereas if you spend $25 on a bottle of wine in Portugal, you're getting something really, really nice in a restaurant, whereas you probably can't find a $25. In fact, I say with assurance there are very few restaurants in Los Angeles where you could even find a $25 bottle of wine, and in most cases, much more.
Very interesting. So that kind of gives people an indication of cost of living difference. Are there any other cost of living differences that you're able to take advantage of when you're living in Portugal versus when you're back in the States?
Well, most things are somewhat cheaper there, I would say. Some things substantially, some things not so much so. As many people will have experienced, manufactured goods, things like that aren't so cheap in Portugal. Some things are, some things aren't. The price of real estate is although it's rising like crazy there, and it's, I think, in danger of even catching up with prices here. Rent in LA, just, normal people to rent a suburban house in LA, it's $3,000 to $4,000 a month right now. So I think not so many people in Portugal are spending that kind of money on their rent. For example, the sailing club that I am a member of would be much more expensive if you were doing the same thing here. So that's a real pleasure. I won't say that it's dirt cheap, but it's reasonable and it's doable. Whereas here, just that kind of thing would be quite expensive. One other thing I want to mention, the things I liked about Porto that I neglected to mention before, and that's that I can live a car-free life. One of the things I really find difficult about living in LA is, I commuted on the freeways about an hour each way for 35 years. And now I just don't want to get on the freeway anymore. I don't want to get in my car. I don't want to spend my time driving in traffic or anywhere else. And so, Porto, for people who choose to live in the center or who choose to live without a car, it's very possible. Certainly, there are reasons to have a car in Porto, and there are reasons to have a car even more so if you live a little further out. But where I live and wanting to live a car-free lifestyle is very, very possible. We can buy, oh my God, practically anything, whether it's tools or clothes or kitchen items, anything within a 10-minute walk of our house. And that's the way I like to live, and then, occasionally if I need to go to Leroy Merlin, did I say that right? Leroy Merlin, then that's just a short metro ride away, so what's not to like, I say.
Yeah, exactly. If you'd like to, you can name drop the sailing club that you use. It's Douro Sport Tour Sailing.
Yeah, Douro Sport Tours Sailing. I think their website is dourosporttour.com. And they have other activities as well. They do paddleboarding and some other things. I'm only involved with the sailing. And it's two guys, Luis and Ricardo, and they're super nice, speak good English. Anybody who's ever wanted to try sailing, I do recommend it, because sailing on the river is beautiful when there's wind. Sailing on the ocean is lovely. If anybody is interested in that particular hobby, I do recommend it. It's such a nice way to relax, and very different than motorboating because of the quiet, and there's no diesel smell. And a sailboat tends to be a lot more stable than a motorboat. Some people find they get seasick on a motorboat, but don't get seasick so much on a sailboat, just because you're not. Well, with a sailboat, think of it. You've got this big dynamic balance between all the pressure, the wind pressure on the sail, and underneath the boat, you've got this big heavy keel. So that keeps you from doing this very much. Okay.
Yeah,
you also
that makes sense.
You don't do this. You do this. So most of the just the movement that you have to endure is just on one axis, and it tends to make it easier. And plus, I love the quiet of it. It's even though I grew up in Southern California, I never really was a surfer, but I think that the pleasure of sailing is a lot like the pleasure of surfing, where you're, harnessing this force of nature with just a tool, but it's not a mechanical tool. It's just just something that humans built that allows you to harness this force of nature and use it to move yourself around. I think it's just a really wonderful thing to do. Super, super relaxing. And so
it sounds super cool. And there's a connection, like you said, to surfing, which connects to Portugal and to Porto for sure.
Yes.
And this also makes me think, we earlier talked about kind of some special interest things. You first mentioned about the sailing, and then the tango, was it right?
Yeah.
Tango dancing.
Yeah.
But then also you have Japanese in your back pocket. You spent 5 years in Japan, and you've started to meet some Japanese people and other Japanese speakers. So I'd like to give the listener an indication, if they do have another language and it's not Portuguese, and they want to continue to practice it, that there's a possibility. Because I don't think many people would think like, oh, there's going to be a Japanese community that I'm going to be able to connect with while living in Porto or in Portugal.
Right.
So tell us about that. How did that all come about?
Sure. As I've already said, my wife is Japanese, so I do have that connection to Japan. And as you mentioned, I lived there for 5 years. It was way back in the 1980s, and I studied hard to learn Japanese and became pretty fluent in Japanese. It's still by far my best foreign language. And you just meet people. One of the first Japanese people that I met was actually that day that I met you at Kiwa Cafe, and there was a Japanese woman that day with her American husband who I met, who also live on the other side of the Boyao market, so they live quite close by. Later on, I met a Japanese woman who lives in my building with her American husband, and I learned from them. Yes, well, yes, that's certainly true. There must be some, counter couples there where it's a Japanese man, but it does seem to be a pattern, certainly. But I learned from her that there, in fact, is quite a big Japanese community in Porto and also in Gaia, and big. It's not really big, but meaning I would guess 20 or 30 people probably that have this kind of loose network, and they figure out how to get Japanese ingredients and how to, do what they need to do. And so yes, I look forward. Actually, I just the last time I was there in January was when I really started to meet those people and make some inroads. And so I'm looking forward very much to spending more time with them. And then also Motoko wasn't there in January with me. And so I'm looking forward to introducing her to the Japanese people that I now know, and hopefully, get her a little tied in with them.
Yeah. Nice. That might start to pull her a little closer to Team Porto, right?
Well, that's the hope. She already loves Porto, is the thing. So it's not a lost cause at all. Just like I did from the first time she went there, she just thought, what a wonderful town. It's such a manageable size. But as I mentioned already, she has a rather strong emotional connection to her former colleagues in Los Angeles and our house. And also, she is very protective of her green card and doesn't want to lose her green card. Japan does not allow dual citizenship, unfortunately. So although Motoko otherwise would be perfectly eligible for American citizenship, she doesn't want to do that because she doesn't want to lose her Japanese citizenship. So this puts us in a little bit of an awkward situation because when the green card requires her to be in the States for 6 months a year. And so since she goes to Japan so much and also Portugal, satisfying those requirements becomes difficult, if not impossible.
I see. Okay. So there's the layer I was missing. Okay. So let's jump back to the house, because we haven't really unpacked that. How did you find it? Did you contact an agent, or did you start looking at listings and then you saw something you liked and then just reached directly out to the listing agent?
I did. I'm somebody who, based on a lot of experience of trying to do things myself, have learned that I like to have expert help. It turns out that it typically goes faster and easier and is even less costly sometimes in the long run to use expert help. So I did use a buyer's agent. The one I used was Goldcrest, after having seen they have YouTube videos. I spoke to them, and I spoke to one or two other buyer's agents, and I went with them, and they did a good job for me. And in fact, unlike real estate agents in the States, they do charge you 2,000 euros just to get up and running, for the service of them searching for
like
the
an
place
engagement fee, right?
an engagement fee, you could call it. Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But then they take the bulk of their remuneration comes from splitting the commission for sure with the selling agent. As I'm sure you're aware, buyer's agents are not traditional in Portugal. It normally hasn't been done that way. It's a little bit of a new concept, and not every selling agent will agree to split with a buying agent. So that puts a little bit of a limit on what places you're going to be shown if you're dealing with a buyer's agent, because they're not going to probably show you excuse me, houses where the selling agent won't participate in that type of a deal. So that makes it a little bit confusing, but and I do know that a lot of people do it on their own, but I don't know how you would approach it. I mean, it seems extremely difficult to me to, because even there's a real lack of inventory, for one thing, in Portugal. There's not so many places to look at. Well, the place that we found and eventually purchased hadn't yet been put on the market. It was on its way to being put on the market. So, working with the agent certainly gave us access to that, which we wouldn't have had otherwise. And, I also, I let them take care of hooking up all my utilities and everything like that. So I don't know. I'm not really being fluent in Portuguese and, well, being lazy, liking to do things the easy way when I can. I went with that, and I definitely didn't regret it. It worked well for us. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do it that way, but for us anyways, it worked very well to use a buying agent.
How many places did you see before you said, all right, this is the one?
Well, this was 2 Novembers ago. I was in Porto for 3 weeks on a buying trip. And so basically, I was going out every day. I was studying intensive Portuguese classes in the morning. In the afternoon, I would meet my agent and we'd go around. So I probably saw 15 different places, I would say, over the course of that time. And it's
a good amount.
Yeah, I saw a fair number of places. The only thing was most of them just weren't that appealing to me for one reason or another. And, I knew I was I was hoping to make it our permanent house in Porto. I didn't want to buy like a transitional place or anything like that. So we had pretty high hopes, and didn't manage to satisfy every one of our hopes. But I really like the place that we eventually found. For one thing, it's very well insulated and heated, which, as you well know, is not always the case at all in Portugal. And so when I was there in January, it felt nice and warm, and I liked it a lot.
And was it like a new build or a complete remodel?
No, it was an old building. I believe it was built in the late 40s. And it had been remodeled, I think, in 2017. So it's this beautiful kind of deco style building on the outside, but inside is really nicely done. The kitchens and bathrooms are highly updated. There's an elevator. Our apartment is on the European second floor. And so, yeah, the building was in, quite nice shape. And it's right on Rua de Sá de Bandeira, which is the beautiful tree-lined street.
Love that street.
Really makes me happy to look out the windows and see those trees. I mean, that was one of the prime things I was looking for, because we live on a really nice, atypical for Los Angeles, tree-lined street here, which just, is so beautiful when we walk. It makes me so happy. And in fact, I remember maybe 2 years ago, I was looking at your videos about the different areas of Porto. And I was fixated on Bonfim for a while because of your suggestions.
Yeah, Rodrigues de Freitas is an awesome tree-lined street.
Yes, it is. And there's a few more streets like that around there, but I just couldn't.
Yes.
We did find a couple of apartments there, but nothing that really was everything we needed. So then I was shown this place in Boial that turned out to be very nice. And in fact, because it is so very central, and interestingly enough, although we're very, very close to a very touristy area, the Boial market area, we're just a block above it. And strangely, for the most part, the tourists don't come up there. There's not really that much, just even though it's only one block up the street. So we get some tourists, but it's not thick with tourists. Not that I have anything against tourists. I mean, tourists are my people, but but still, you understand what I mean. It's a little bit. For example, we saw one really beautiful apartment under construction at Battaglia by Ildefonso, but it was too touristy for me right there. Just a constant sea of tourists outside your door all day long. So
umbrellas, right? The tourist umbrellas walking around.
Sure.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, so did you pay cash or get a mortgage on the property?
Well, we paid half cash roughly, and I did get a mortgage for the property, but and this is a good bit of information for your audience, that getting a mortgage in Portugal, or I guess in Europe, is quite different than getting one here. And the most salient detail for us here is that the way that it's structured is that the youngest person on the mortgage the mortgage has to be scheduled to be paid off by the time that the youngest person on the mortgage is it 75 years old, I think? Isn't that right, Josh?
They can push to, I think, 79, but yeah.
79?
Yes.
Okay, we were told 75. So because we were already
some products out there, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was already in my 60s when we were looking for it. We just, it just meant that even though we were only borrowing half the price of the apartment, it was still going to be very, very high monthly payments. And so what we were able to do was we took a cash out second mortgage on our house here. And so I was able to get a mortgage doing that. Not very desirable, because mortgage rates here are pretty much double.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. So you weren't able to take advantage of the fact that Europe has lower mortgage rates, but you did have access to capital that would allow you to have a longer term, so you could pay it out over more months.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. And how was the process? Like, would you say that the buying process was difficult, or you were really helped and supported by the agent that you used?
Well, I'm not a big fan of paperwork, so and there is paperwork like anywhere else, but the buying agent, made it as easy as it could be. You're still signing a lot of papers, and we had to go through the paperwork of the excuse me, the mortgage here and this and that. So, it's not a walk in the park, but it wasn't prohibitively difficult at all.
Okay. What are some of the challenges that you find with splitting time in two places? Whether that's like having to keep house in both places, or other things that we haven't talked about that you have to juggle. I mean, I know we've spoken about pets, but what are some things that we haven't brought up?
Well, in all honesty, it doesn't cause me that much difficulty, other than the fact that when I'm LA, I'm always wanting to be in Portugal. I have my garden here, which does require upkeep, and then there's just the details of keeping everything, up to date in terms of all the payments I have to make for this and that and the next thing. But the internet certainly makes that a lot easier. We can make all of our payments online and deal with all that way. So it's, for somebody who wanted to be living in both places, it actually is, I wouldn't say it's so very impractical. It can be done for sure. Although, our air travel bills are pretty high, from all this flying around. Well, you do feel a little bit, have to say, unrooted, when you're constantly, just not because anybody's pulling you, it's all 100%, of my own volition, of our own volition. But it's a little bit disorienting when you've got half a life here and half a life there. But it's just a matter of a person's likes and preferences and priorities. It honestly hasn't been a big problem.
Okay, great. I did want to ask you, what do you do for health insurance? Because you're not able to get on the Portuguese health system. So when you're here, do you carry something, or you just carry something throughout the whole year and you're able to use that?
Right. We, in fact, have not arranged proper health insurance for Portugal.
Okay.
We have good insurance here that was originally through my wife's work, and then we were able to keep the same keep the same coverage when we switched over to Medicare. We're with Kaiser, a big hospital system here, which I do recommend for people. They've taken very good care of us for the last 30 plus years. But so we did have, in fact, my wife is a little older than me, and she's a little frail. That's perhaps overstating it, but her health isn't 100% robust, let's say that. So during the time we've been in Porto together, she did in fact have to make 2 emergency room visits, which turned out to be nothing. Thank you for your concern. But we went through the experience, and in both cases we went in the middle of the night to the emergency room at correct me if I'm getting the name wrong, but I believe it's the Hospital Sant Antonio. Yeah.
Okay.
Near,
yep. It's one of the biggies.
In the center.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they took care of us very well, uninsured. The emergency room visits ended up being each of them just a little over €100. So,
wow.
Yeah. And with no insurance coverage whatsoever,
Wow.
So from an American point of view, there's another thing which is very affordable for you,
Yeah.
In further answer to your earlier question, because that certainly would have cost $1,000 in the States without question. And so, we need to deal with that. But as of yet, we've been playing a little fast and loose.
Yeah, and I think with your situation, maybe like a safety wing that company's safety wing would work quite well, because you'd be able to do like in blocks of 4 weeks. I mean, they're flexible. You can kind of do as many days as you want, but like if you want to have it rolling, if your time is open-ended, then you can start out with 4 weeks and just let it roll. And their rates are pretty reasonable. We traveled out to Asia and got a plan through Safety Wing, and it was super affordable. So
okay.
we have to do something different whenever we travel back to the US, because they don't allow you to have coverage in the country you're a citizen of, I believe is what it is. So we can't have it there, and you can't have their health insurance for a country you're a resident of. So that also eliminates Portugal, but that's fine. Okay. So you don't actually, it doesn't sound like you actually find that many challenges to doing this balancing, and this kind of 90 days on, 90 days off is something that many of our viewers have reached out and talked to us about, at least starting out with attempting to do. So is it something that you would recommend?
I absolutely would, for somebody in a situation where, for whatever reason, that made sense. I've talked a little bit about, what the inconveniences are that we do experience, but they're quite minor. They're really not bad. It's just awesome. It's worth it for the benefit we gain, which is a lot.
Well, awesome. Daniel, thank you so much for sharing with us. It was really fascinating catching up with you, and I hope to do it in person next time you're here in Porto. Sound good?
Excellent. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again. Bye.
Goodbye.